Wasa ʼatudli.átk Tlingit Johan. Ḳaakligéi Tlingit Verb Yoo Tlingit Tlingit Tawak Gach Kinda Chunid Gwell Ḳaakligéi Kayaaní Kanach Gwell Has Ḳaakligéi we Dúl Wooch Gwell Dísi Aqawe Tlingit Woochi Tlingit Kawat Aqawe X'éig Gwachuin we Tlingit As we what's you do a sag a kach one conins kina H we Ḳaak Canada was kan Ḳaakligéi Tlingit Negun Chich Yake at Yahaani Kach De Yahas Net the Klug we Yao Atchawi sheet Kach Ayati Tlingit Kanachoi Adati has Gene Ya Yes you Ḳatangoe Ya Hajiu Ya Yidat I Khashid Gwell Kanachoi They Ḳaakligéi sweaty Kanach sweaty Xati I Khashid you do a sag I do sheet hit ati you do a sago ya Tlingit Chosaku Shawat sheet Ḳaakligéi Tlin ye jene away Dasa hasak Gwalliech Kajide haska Gwati where Kuik is Yao Kuik Kanachoi to a sagu Yao Kach Aya Yach ʼatudli ʼátk Ya one kanins Uche ye has aus ne Ya Kayaaní Ya we Yes Kuu Ya Kayaaní Katkuatini Achu Tlingit Tua Oshko with Chiti Dana Kuu one kanins Kanachoi Hashaqeq Tlingit you has two art Ya Hatajhan Kisani has to ya ark Uhan Koach to Asago Adat Hayawas Taki Ye awe has to ya ark Aqa awe Kanachoi Hashukade Nashiegach to teen Ye awe to it like Kegach to teen Gwashkiwe Gilchish Ach 8 Isa Achi Yitua Gesagu Watani Qakwati Tlingit Tlingit Aqadleit Tlingit Beqati. Okay. What was I talking about?
Did you mention something about the springtime or maybe berries or something and herring, going to Sitka?
Yeah.
Couple of wanganines in there. I couldn't quite catch all of them.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll say wanqanins, which means sometimes. So, yeah, and then there's a really cool thing like wanqanins, and then you use like a repetitive. Like the first person I saw that was Walter Sokolov. He said, "Chinedi owe ohan, wanqanins koa, an chaketan, you hadu du saknuch." So he said, we are Chinedi, but sometimes people always call us an Ḳaakligéi, the people from the house in the middle of the village. So you can use these sometimes always constructions, which are really fun. So you could say one qanins yedna teach. Sometimes it's always that way. And it's like a really neat Tlingit logic thing. It works really well in Tlingit. But yeah, I was saying sometimes, I said takitit koaha. It's springtime, because I see all kinds of things that tell me it's spring. But well, yeah, nach yati which the katyagi, every day is longer. Qakan ach kat ye andagan. Sun shining right on my face right now. What else did I talk about? I saw some other things. Maybe some ʼatudli.átk things.
Did you say Canada geese?
Yep. Because then, you know, I see geese and douche. Anybody know douche? They don't really come here, but they pass through. I see them in Fairbanks a lot. They're pretty tall. They look like the Karate Kid when they get angry.
Crane.
Yeah, like a sandhill crane, douche. We had a cat in Fairbanks and it tried to make friends with everything. And it was going towards, like, real slow towards this big old crane. It was just this big old crane just sitting at the end of the road. I was like, don't, leave it alone. The crane like went real big, like just like Karate Kid. And luckily the cat just took off. I was like, okay, cat, you're not that silly. Yeah, and then ducks and mallard ducks. And then, yeah, talking about a lot of people are in sick. The herring have already been spawning. And so, yeah, ʼatudli.átk would be they are spawning right now. And then there's a lot of people. There's a new, I get excited when we get new phrases. So I'll put one, maybe I'll make a little document here for it. Let's see. So this one, I actually heard this one twice this year, so it's pretty fun. Sometimes things like kind of synchronize like that. People are trying to think of just similar things. I don't know. It's pretty fun. So here's the phrase. So that's usually how I've heard it. ʻaikhallit. How could we find out what that is? What do y'all think? We're gonna do some investigations. Should have brought my sunglasses in here.
Look up the verb root.
Yeah.
Being the verb root and ха being the pronoun.
Yeah, right. So that is a really good analysis. So you probably have something like this, right, with a classifier, and there's probably an object, right? Let's go see if we can find cleat. Oh, close that. What's that? Oh, it's looking for something else. Okay. So let's start with everybody's favorite verb dictionary. Oops. Share. Okay. So we'll go down to tlingit, see what we can find. Anybody ever heard tlingit before as a verb root? Here it is. So we see throw, usually with force, so that the object scatters. We do have one with give up, but you'd have K in front of it. There's a different one, which is to slide, but this is especially animals. It doesn't, whenever I would try to use this with people, like the speakers would reject it. It's usually like a land otter just like really skidding across the, when it runs and slides. And then there's a related one for a canoe, especially to go really fast. So if you really paddle that canoe and everybody's paddling, then you get that sucker to just really scoot along. And then you'd have scatter and sprinkle. So there seem to be like two here. I would say those are probably two different verb roots. But there's different ways we can look at these things. And so let's go look up throw, because it's probably not, I'm just going to say it's not slide. I don't think it's slide. We could look that one up as well. So let's go to throw and just see if there's anything in there. And we'll look up slide just for fun. So with throw, this is one of those verbs where there's 20 different versions depending on the type of action. So you have plural objects, which would be ʼx'éig, and that's when we get, they're going to throw you all into the furnace. And then ʼx'éig, it's to hold the end of something and then throw the other end of it, like especially a net. To throw a solid object, ʼx'éig, So this is sort of, and these solid objects tend to be defaults for like metaphors and stuff. Like, so you could say ḳaakligéi, which would be I lost it. But especially that could also mean I forgot something that I should really know, like somebody's name that I know. Throwing a bundle of things, like an anchor, bundle of firewood. Throwing a ball. This would also be shooting the ball. Kayaaní. They shot the basketball. A stick-like object. So throwing ʻatudli.átk. They didn't throw the pencil down. To throw a general, this is usually like a living thing. Threw the dog outside. Threw themselves down. Throwing liquid. Hín gant ťáilígeis. And throwing things, so here's our Tlingit verb. So we have hín gant ťáilígeis, which tells us this is a perfective, and so this tells us that that particular one is zero conjugation. Dana yude ashlit. So this matches ʻatudli completely, right? So ʻatudli would be the third person version of ʻatudli. So this tells us that this is probably our verb. And this is the verb you'd use for throwing your money all over the place. Just throwing your money around. Spending it too much, perhaps. But that leaves us with the second part, I. So we're going to try, and so my guess is we're throwing I, whatever that is. So we're going to go to the dictionary and see if we could find I. Make this bigger so I can see it. Okay. So let's go to the T apostrophe and see if anything comes up. And if it doesn't, I'm going to show you one other source that maybe we haven't looked at too much. So here's ʻatángi, ʻawak, ʻakhiyan. So we go down, and there is like a hot springs, and then there's ʻaínig, which is a fever. So this starts to get us probably pretty close. And then I'm going to have to enter, there's some stuff that's not, like there's so much stuff that's not in this dictionary. So let me show you folks another resource. Have we looked at this thing very much? This is the Tlingit stem list by Jeff Lear.
We have a little bit, I think.
Okay. So if you encounter some kind of noun that you haven't seen, like this is a spot you can, and same with a verb root. So this is a list of stems, but it has a bunch of nouns in it as well. And so if we go down to and look for I, so this is alphabetized on the left. We go T apostrophe. And then my experience with this is whenever you click on the thing, you end up like a page ahead of where you want to be. So we'll back up a little bit and we get up to, here's which is the first entry in the T apostrophes, right? If we go down, we do see I right here, and just know that there's a different way of marking this. Like there's an apostrophe in between, like on different sides of the vowels and stuff. Like it's a bit much, and so we're not going to get into all the details of what he's putting here, but we do have shiplap, and so that might not be it. But if we go up to ta, we do have an entry that says I. It's right there. So this is how he marks a long low verb back in 1978. I don't know everything that he's doing with, or the vowel. I don't know everything he's doing with vowels here. But you have hot springs or heat. So that's the entry that's missing in the dictionary that I'm working on, this heat. So then when you come back to this, we get I'm throwing heat. Or what do you think that means? It's not like a metaphor.
Maybe throwing sweat.
Yeah. So like really sweating. right? And so this came about because Ḳaakligéi is over in Sitka, and I was on the phone with her the other day, and she was in the A&B hall where people were just making stuff to give to people. Everybody's working really, really hard. And I said, and she laughed, and then she said, I think she called it ʼatudli.átk, which she named her daughter, which is maybe, I would say, ʼatudli.átk. So it's the boss of the sweatshop. So, because people are working hard over there. So káaání to everybody who's putting in the energy to make sure that this is a wonderful event. So káaání.
It was definitely set up like the boss of the sweatshop.
Yeah, right. Just like cranking it out, the ʼatudli gifting manufacturing line.
We were all listening.
Okay, let's see. And then I just said I hope we really protect the herring. Some people who have come to our lands have really messed things up. And not everybody. There's a lot of people who care about the land. And that, you know, and we have this other phrase which I think is important. So I'd say Tlingit Verb. So this is a really important phrase, I think. Anybody recognize what this is saying?
Our little grandchildren, the places for them.
Yes, the place reserved for our little grandchildren, for our future generations. And so this is a really critical concept in Tlingit. And then I said, some people don't think about it. So there's this verb. There's another good verb over here. Let's see where it goes. It's not that one. It's sitting down. Close that. So we're going to go look up this talk verb. I like this verb a lot. So you would say, we are, oh, it's right here. So this would be, you know, so it says do. So this is another one, right? So if we see do, dot, ha, yausatak. It's an interesting verb because the object is the one who's doing the action, which does happen sometimes in Tlingit, right? So this is how chat yausatak, I'm taking care of him, I yausatak. We would usually expect like yausatak, right? So the underline X to be right here, but it pops out for some reason. And then you have this indirect thing. So you could say, I'm taking care of you, I dot chat yausatak. You're taking care of me, ach dot I yausatak. So then once you sort of learn, like, okay, this one's a little unusual, so that, but I can handle it because I know object pronouns and I know relational pronouns. But you can also say, Kayaaní hastu yaak, dot ha yausatak. We are caring for it. We're taking care of it. And so this also is how you can, this could mean like kind of serving someone or caring for and making sure that they've just got everything that they need. But it also works for concepts like our future generations. And so this one elder, his name is Ḳaakligéi Norman James, and maybe after our break we'll just listen to his speech. Is pretty, it's kind of short, but it's just wonderful. And so he's the one that I got this concept from, because he also said he'd say Nashe Hasushukade Nashe Hasushukade Hasayatinen Yahashikohas. So he said our ancestors used to be able to see way out into the future. And the reason for that And you'd say in our language. And the reason for that is you'd say because they are always thinking about this place reserved for our grandchildren. So I don't know, the recording's about 6 minutes long. Did we watch that one yet? Anybody know? This is what it looks like. He's sitting on the beach. It's a lake in what's Teslin Lake?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think we did a long time ago or maybe class.
Yeah, because the audio, you talked about the audio and struggling with editing it, I think, because it's a little noisy.
Right. Yeah, it's a little windy. A little bit windy.
well,
But I
first
mean,
semester.
I think this would be interesting, right? Because what if we watch it again and we've been studying all this stuff and we'll just see, because we can read it, like, so this one has closed captions, and so we can read it and then we'll listen to him at the same time.
Adai Otan Axai, Tlingit Sai, Ḳaakligéi, Tlingit Norman James, Natasahin Dakhaditi, Natasahin Akokau, Ayakotenke, Ḳaakligéi at Ḳaakligéi Yat, Estoho at Ḳaakligéi. Tlingit Hadakain. Yakotenke Hayakotenke Den Kadenia X'éig. Nahwakuna Sise to Adewe. Chagodahoe. Yes, Yawaka. Hayakotenke were Kotkeneki. That's all he did. Akademie na khadaye juye jutune takat ohan Tlingit akhil ko sudakh ye has hadakhain hadaj khanki astu ya ak khatsu astu oten getunach Shikte Nahlie is a Yatine as to Shukwade. Chatloko has to Shukwade that is you sitakan. Chatloko dies or Yatkin as to Dichkanki as to Yak. I either call a hut call our dark or hot and suit Chatlok. Ḳaakligéi Yoo X nuuk at teenage to your ark, put you Jincot, Ḳaakligéi Jincot, Ḳaakligéi talk Yadach. You nuuk at teenage to your ark awe, Ḳaakligéi Atinoe, Achidi de Shies Dachaka. Ayakotenke Tin Kadeni Nachia Ḳaakligéi. Kostiach gut es tu adi, Yushkand tu adi. Jakonach, Tlingit Reinach, Yukochtuchlaat. Jadase, Tlingit Reinach, Asai, Estusai, Tlingit Reinach, Yukonach tuchlat Jatok, Yewach tunatit. Jatok wada tuchaten. Adayan sayo si Kayaaní. Ako dakoe Khatin. Tasawe Kayaaní na Kadaye jutune. Asawe Hayakotenke. Jakochte Yewune. Esti Kotenke Chok. Wooch like do shoot talk shikre. Ayakotenke get seen in Aga. Ashukunda Edoe. Yin Kokonik. Tlingit has Ajiye nas awatanin as to Yakuske Dakit. ʼatudli.átk Chayenka Khasiku Adakhatyan Yuditikaye Tlelakat Khatseko Chatloko to Khaten Atshikde Tletkot Kene Kikaktuat Aktuna Hashukwade Hashugunda Awe Chatloko to Khaten Kayaaní det Adaha Hayati Ye Takat Ye Nakwe Agade Yard Nini Awe Chatlok to in Yakohle Chatlok Akidi de Fuan Kadene Nakyanak to Siki Ashukwade Yadesli Nawad Utuat Okay Hayati Yahayako Tlingit.io Sitak Ye Tlingit lands Ashwada University. You could say you should to audit your let show pain at the niche. Lands to Achoni, 8 yacht of Achoni, 8 car. Atsuyi in Yokatan Kushe Tlekosiku Aka Yokataniso Kunichish Achedisi Ache Kaden Enach Achedi Deshi Yayaka ʼatángi Yayaka to Siki Kadeniana Kunichish Eoxikasu Kunichish.
I gotta edit that. There's a few things I caught in there, like spelling stuff, and then that one part when he's talking about me, he says, "Whenever we're together, we're always laughing." So that's what he was talking about. We must have done that one a long time ago. Anyways, like, so I was just thinking about this, like trying to put all this stuff into our minds as we like study all this stuff, study. But then I think when we go back and we listen to something that we listened to several months ago, my hope is like oh, I just recognize all kinds of things that is going on in live, like, so like a speaker is so amazing because they just put all this stuff together, like it's just flowing in their mind, all these different parts that we're trying to get to move together, where we have to push these buttons and push these things together, whereas for them it just sort of like it's got to flow. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. But I do believe, some people make fun of the fact that people have an accent when they first start speaking Tlingit. I think it's just fun. I think that's so amazing because there was generations where nobody had accents because nobody spoke, and now that's changing. And so as that changes, I think you do that, and as you manufacture the language, it does sound artificial and a little bit chunky, but it starts, through the listening and the continuing to talk. Like the biggest thing I think is keep talking. You gotta keep talking. That's the only way it starts to kind of flow, and through listening, and just like keep believing in yourself, and don't let people who like to, some people just like to make people feel bad. I don't really get it, but some people tell me hurt people. I'm like, okay, yeah, but don't let them hurt you. So, anyways, thoughts, questions, anything?
Ďákujeme, I'm feeling, yeah, I recognize a lot more, but replicating is not happening yet.
Yeah, and I would say, I would just walk around and I would just be talking to myself. And I'd be talking to I had these 2 dogs. I'd talk to the dogs. And we had kids. I'd talk to the kids, right? And so like, you just have to keep it going. And then that's the other part too, is like, it's sort of like, someone who's going to be in a play for the first time. Like it's got to be so scary to put that script down and just be like, okay, I know these lines. I can do it, you know, and then to just sort of float out there. But that's what we're trying to get to, is so that, you know, there's nothing wrong with writing a speech and reading it. I do remember Nora told us so that we're not allowed, you know, she used to make sure that we didn't read from notes, or like we could take all the notes we wanted to. When it came time to deliver our end of the immersion camp speeches, we just had to stand up there. But what was really neat was there was a few elders like Ḳaakligéi, Nora Marks Dowenhauer, Ḳanak Ruth Demert, and Ţingit Mary Anderson. When I was up there talking, if I couldn't figure out how to say something, they would say it for me because they knew what I was trying to say. Like we had sort of gotten to know each other so well by living, which I think we got to figure out how to bring this part back, is we would just go live somewhere for 10 days and just live in the language, which is something that I think we'll have to figure out how to do, is get people to, it's rough, it's, the days are long, everybody's tired, but I think that gives you this sort of environment where you're kind of as a group agreeing to not use English. And we can figure out ways to do that too. So we do have immersion times and times to get together and to use the language and to share it and to get feedback. So it does come. Okay.
Hello. Yeah, I've been a line cook for a larger part of my life, and doing things by memory definitely does help things flow a lot easier from start to finish. I try to go timelines, things I do every day. I wake up, I drink coffee, I read, I study Tlingit, I go to work, I come home. I'm starting to get a little bit of a flow, but at some point, even when I'm at work, if there's too much, all of a sudden I find myself just go blank and go, where am I? You know, and where do I pick up at that point? You know, if I don't have the script, then I'm kind of figuring out, well, what is it I'm going to say now? And the biggest thing for me is that trying to get used to completing, like some things when you're talking in Tlingit, particularly a story or a clan or anything, you don't want to talk about other things. And to me, it's real difficult to try to stay focused when everyone's looking at you. But when I first started drumming, it was like 1996, we came up to celebration with the takeaway, and it was real difficult for me then. But at the time, I had my aunts there, my grandma was there, and they would stand. There was like 3 or 4 of us that knew the songs really well, and we were teaching other people in the group, and so they'd always be there standing next to me. So finally, like 2000, when I came up and did my first drumming by myself, without my grandma was gone, my aunts are gone, you know, I had to think about it for a minute and go, well, they're actually right here. I could still hear them, you know, inside, I could still hear them. So here it goes, and just let it rip. And then what do you know, by then I was ready. And sometimes it just takes a little bit more practice.
Yeah. And I would say, like, some folks asked me a while ago, like, how did you become a speaker of Tlingit? And I said, well, I would just, every time I saw someone who spoke it, I would just talk to them. And I wouldn't be, you know, sure, I was nervous, but I wouldn't be so scared of sounding silly that I wouldn't try. And there's people who made fun of me, you know, and I don't want to brag, but there's some people who made fun of me and I could speak better than they can now, right? And it's like, but it's also not a competition, right? And so you also got to be careful of some of these things, like who's the best and who's better. But the other thing is, like, is what you're doing elevating everybody in the group? And I think if we can get back to that sort of mentality, because if you look at some of the speeches and stuff that are just really classically Tlingit, like there's a lot of respect, there's a lot of kindness, there's a lot of love, and those things are in there, not really like laughing at people. Like usually those are the stories where like everything goes wrong, right? And so, yeah, and just believe that there are people who are rooting for you and there are people who are supporting you. And some of them are alive right now and some of them aren't. Some of them are ancestors and some of them are future generations. But we're the ones that, like, we're the group that helps each other, and we're the group that is like rooting for the success part. Because I don't understand that part of that's crept into our way of life where we're waiting for someone to fail. Because like I don't understand that bit, but to also just sort of know like, and I think it's good to have practice sessions, right? To engage in stuff and to make speeches in certain situations. And some of them will be, because then there'll be a real moment. Like they'll need someone to say something at a funeral or to say something at a ʼatudli.átk, and then you might be the one who does that, which is really cool. Okay. But before we take our break, I thought we should do a couple of these because it's been a minute since we've done some of these. So again, we read the Tlingit and then we will translate. So who wants to go first?
Yeah.
Ah,
Adusoe ʼaik, dukik oe ʼaik.
okay. What do you think that's saying?
Who's that invited here?
Yeah, there is inviting for sure, for sure. And if we go, just look up this ʼik verb. So it should be down here. So here's ʼik, and so you have to call out, to shout, or to invite, right? It's the same verb, right? And so we'll look at both of those. So let's look up invite first, then we'll look out call. So under invite, so we get ʼatudli.átk. Oh, Isha, I'm not invited. ʼatudli.átk, I'm going to invite people. ʼatudli.átk, I'm inviting you to eat with me. A couple things, like, so if we wanted to, because we've been looking stuff up, and then we sort of just look at some of the sentences. So there's a couple things I want to actually do with this here. So let me, I think that's what it was. Let me check. ʼatudli.átk, and then we've got ye ʼaakligéi, and then ʼatángi, and ʼatángi. Okay, so now I want us to like kind of be able to, there's like really great sample sentences in here, and they show us a lot of stuff, right? So this shows you that there's a negative form of this to not invite. So could we say, so we have I am not invited, or I wasn't invited. You could either way, right? And so what we have here is the first person singular object pronoun. We have a fourth person subject pronoun. So what if I wanted to say, we were not invited? What we have in the verb, while you're thinking about it, what we have in the verb is we've got chat, and then we've got you. Well, you've got you, do, 0, whoops, I need to put the number 2. Okay. So what should change is this, right? If I say we were not invited. So I can copy this. I could change one thing. Any thoughts?
Would it be ha?
Yes, and that would cause some contraction. ʼatudli.átk. We were not invited. How about you were not invited? We'll do something positive after this. So we're going to copy this one because it's going to be very similar to this one with the contracted w.
Would it be you do ich?
Yeah, well, ʼatudli.átk.
Yeah.
Right? So now this starts to make sense. Like, oh, look at this now. See the sentence. So that's what we have here. So if we want to say, so then we've got tlach in front of it, right? So tlach plus chat. And so this is the verb as we start to sort of pull apart the verb. So if I wanted to say, I was invited, what do you think I'm going to need to do? So if I took this, and I've got ʼatudli.átk, and in there, I know that these are the parts that I have, right? So to turn this into I was invited, what kinds of things, just any of the steps, would I have to do?
Well, you would drop the U. 'Cause that's only a marker of something that's not part of reality.
Yeah,
I don't remember the other part of it, but I know I think maybe the classifier too. I'm not sure.
yes, and this U is tied to something else. Like, so I would say something else causes the U to be there. So let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of both of them at the same time.
Oh yeah, the tlach.
So no
Right?
no Okay, so now we're on our way. We're on our way. We actually only have one more thing to change. And then we get to go to the party.
Renee, just checking the you here, is that for perfective?
It is.
Okay.
And in order to be invited, that must have already happened. It's one of those things. Like, Tlingit loves those things. Like, did it happen? Okay. Then it happened. So now we've dropped the tlach. What about that? If the verb happened, then this is one thing that needs to change. What was 0 changed to?
Is it yeah? No.
I would guess either sit or sa.
Well, let's go back to our, let's see, where was it? Okay, let's go here. Okay, so going back into here. So where's 0 on this chart? Can we find it? It's right here. So to transfer it to happening or to be that way, we add the I. So it goes from here, so we go from 0 to ya, da to di, sa to si, s, you go s, z, sha, shi, sh, gli, sha, shi, sh, chi. So we put this in use in real time, coming back to our little exercise. If this changes to ya, oops, then this, what do you think it's going to sound like right here after the do? And let me give you a big hint. When we write this Y with the 2 dots over it, that means it can be a Y or a W. In some cases, it just likes to be a W. But if there's a U in front of it, it'll always be a W. Khat would do.
What do what ich?
Khat would do ich. That's it.
Do what?
I was invited, right? So now we take this same sort of thing, and if we say, okay, I was invited, Let me actually move this up here. So what if I wanted to say you were invited? Only one thing has to change here, but it will cause this to contract.
That changes to he.
Yes, changes to it, contracts that. So this, what this little equal sign means, if we're just trying to add more stuff to our abilities, right? It means that's tied to the thing after it. That's all that it means. It just means it's got to attach to something, right? So now we're going to change it to this. So this would be ʼatudli.átk. And then we can just sort of keep pattern building. I said, oh, well, what if I change this to ye? That means you write ye space. ʼatudli.átk. Y'all were invited. Right, and so this is object changing once we sort of look up a sentence. The other thing is when we see ye ḳaakligéi, this tells us something as well. So if a future verb that you look up in the verb dictionary and it lists the future, if it has, so for a future that has ye in front of it, that means it's qa conjugation. And if it has k in front of it, that means it's ga conjugation, right? And so ye and k popping up in the future, there's nothing random about it, right? So that's why when you say tsu ye ik kwasatin, the ye is there because that's also ga conjugation. If you want to say it's going to get better, it's going to be good, ke because it's ga conjugation. We're going to be strong, ke haguchlitzin, because it's ga conjugation, right? So these things, they start to reveal themselves, and the more that you understand this stuff, the more, once you see a sentence, you'll spot it. So if you looked up that thing and say, oh, ye ḳaakligéi, I know how to use that verb now. I could command someone to invite. If I want to say, invite the people, ḳaakligéi, invite the people. Okay, and then the last one was X'éig ʼatángi. So this is X'éig, I invited you, right? So now, same thing. Now we can say X'éig, I invited you all. X'éig, I invited them all. I could say X'éig, I invited a singular them. I could say ḳaakligéi, I invited people. So like once I've got that subject, I say, oh, now I can change the object, right? It's way on the outside. Khan is a contraction of achin. So you could say achin or khan. Khan kananik, tell me. Achin kananik, tell me. Then this is a pretty interesting thing. So if you're ever curious about how to do this verb so this other verb could happen, that's what you've got here. I invited you so you can eat with me, or so you would, right? Would or could, doesn't matter. X'éig ʼatángi. And so what we have here, we did this verb a while ago when we had icha, you are eating, right? And then we had icha, and then we had gaqicha, right? So we see these, right? This is happening right now. This already happened. This is going to happen. So there's another one we haven't really looked at yet, which would be qiqa, which you wouldn't really say this too much. Like this is a hortative verb. It means let you eat. Hortatives are usually used for like let us, let them, let me. So you could say qaqa, or wait, you'd say aqaqa, let them, well, we'll just use atqaqa, let them eat, right? So like let's say we're at a ʼatudli and that something's taking too long and I'm helping with the planning and stuff. I might come in and say atqaqa, or I might say hasatqaqa, let them all eat. Bring out the food, right? But if you put this letter T on it, so if you learn how to build a hortative, you put a T on it. And sometimes it's a YIT. That means so it could happen, right? And so again, this is probably more than you need to know right now, but when you look in the verb dictionary and you look at sentences, you look at other stuff, or you hear people talk, you will start to catch some of these things, right? So you could say, for example, hot, hua, good, tlingit, shtu, kash, tuwut. Right, so here's the T thing. What do you think this says? And then we could take our break. Little kids in the language nest, they say it. They just switch the words around a little bit. Tlingit shtukal tuwut hat chwagut. There's a little chant that they do in the nest, and they say that. But you could say it this way too. Hat chwagut tlingit shtukal tuwut. Any parts that you might recognize.
Is it we're going to learn how to walk in the language?
Well, I am. So what if we got hat chwagut on its own? What is that part? I'll show you the command formula.
Is that we are walking? Come here.
Yes. So if that's the command, now this is it has happened. So how would you say, now we're saying I, so what would be the completed version of come here, featuring me? Like in English, if someone said come here, and if you did the thing, how could you say you did that thing?
I came here.
I came here. So, and now you get this part, right? First verb, second verb. I came here, so what does this look like? It's a little bit different than how we might have seen it before. But if you focus on that part, maybe. Well, there's this shtu kash tu. Very similar to something that we might have just learned a little while ago.
Studying Tlingit.
Or I came here to study Tlingit. Boom! That's it. But now you can look up all kinds of, you could there's a whole bunch of stuff you could put there. And I think as you learn some of these kind of little sentence formulas, look them up. Look up the hortative, throw a T on it. I came here to eat it. Right? Which is I came here to kick people which I'm not going to do, but you could say that. Okay. Thoughts or questions? Everybody okay?
Ḳaakligéi, would you call that a purpose clause
Yes.
or
Purposive.
purposive?
Purposive.
Purposive. Wow.
I didn't name it, but I call it the cheech verb then, because it sounds like a porpoise to me. So, but yeah.
I like
And there's probably a future where we rename all these things with big names, and we'll just say it's the so it could happen verb, right? And so, and then the hortative can be the let it happen verb, right?
That's pretty cool. I hadn't noticed that. All you have to do is add a T to the end of the verb
Yeah.
with the hortative.
I'll
That's-
I'll show you guys probably on. I'm doing too much. I could sense I'm doing too much right now, but I'll show you folks probably on Thursday this document. I think I've put it up before. It shows a whole bunch of verb modes, and I started rethinking it last summer and thinking, don't think about meaning, but think about here's a pattern, and once you learn this pattern, you can adjust it to get these other meanings, right? And so this is really important to sort of. It is important to figure out because you'll learn. You know some hortative forms like yenqati, let it be, ʼatudli.átk, let's go, right? Those are hortative forms, right? So then you could say adat ye ju to ne yen qatiyit. We worked on it so it could be that way. Right, and then that could be something like so our language would be strong. You could say ʻātangi adat yejutu ne yenqatiyit. We worked on it so it would become that way. Right? It's just really cool. And until you learn how to build a hortative, you look it up or you memorize it. Right? So here's one, ʻnachtu'at. So I could say achus ʻatudli ʻátk ʻnachtu'atit. I put my shoes on so we could go, right? And it's such a simple thing to say. It's a weird sentence, right? Like I remember I was watching this comedian and he was talking about like how hard it is to get out of the house because like his 3-year-old won't put their shoes on. And he's like, could you imagine if adults were like that? Like, hey, are we going to dinner? No. Susie won't put her shoes on. We can't go. It's so funny. But this gives you something to show you like you could tie any two verbs together like this.
So, Ḳaakligéi, just to clarify, so an imperative, correct me if I'm wrong, please. If is an imperative second person and a hortative is first or third person?
Yeah, first, third, correct. And then
Okay.
you can have hortative second persons, but we don't really use that. But that's what you're seeing that form here, qihat, so you could eat, right?
Okay. Wow.
But you wouldn't use this as just qiha. Maybe if, okay, let's say you're just going a little too hard with your diet, right? And I'm getting concerned that you're not allowing yourself to eat. Then I would say ʻatqikhat, let yourself eat, right? So it gets a little weird, but to build this purposive, that's what you have right here. I invited you so you could eat with me. But yes, you are correct. You are correct. So commands are second person singular and plural. Hortatives tend to be first person singular plural, third person singular plural. It could be fourth person too. Let the people eat. Like it could work that way. Gestein.
That last phrase you wrote down, the I put my shoes on so we could go. How would you turn that into like a command form? So like if I wanted to tell my kids like put your shoes on so we can go. Because I find that I always want to say that and I don't know how.
No, I've been there. I've been there, right? So okay, so this shows you here, that's a perfective. Because it's closed, short and high, that tells us something. What do you think? Anybody remember what that tells us? Perfective closed, short and high. It's zero conjugation, right? So it's zero conjugation. Oops, I should say sorry, I messed this up. So the first thing, so this is the verb, right? What am I doing? Okay, so here's the thing. There's any obvious things that we might have to change, right? So we have ʼatudli. Those probably both need to change, right? Because you're not, I could say put my shoes on to my feet. I could command someone to do that if I'm like the king of whatever. Put my shoes on my feet, right? But we'll start with that. Yeah, I could also say I put your shoes on your feet. So that's the first step. How are we going to change it to your feet and your shoes?
Would you use the do?
Okay, so
Or
if you have do, now I say it, this is saying I put their shoes on their feet. So I'm telling you maybe about my kid. But that's gone to third person. So we're not changing, we're not worried about the verb. We're dealing with these two nouns outside the verb. Du ʼusg, du tītli. So how am I going to make those yours? Your feet, your shoes. We went from ach to du. Yes. Ich ʼusg, now ʻatudli. Now this will have to change. So this is chwase or chwade. So the parts that are here is there's a perfective marker, there's cha, and there's de. That's how you get chwade, right? That's the secret. So what has to happen here is the perfective marker has to go away. And a lot of times a command form does not have a pronoun in it. It's just absent of the pronoun. It's kind of a weird thing. Cha. That's how you tell someone, eat it. Cha. But if the classifier is plus D, so any of those ones, going back to our chart, any of these, da, di, s, z, sh, tle, sh, j, if it's any of those, well, it has to be minus I. So da, s, sh, any of those four. Now you must have, that must be, now it must have a pronoun. Okay. A plus D verb must have a pronoun for the command. Okay. Because, and there's no, it's nothing random, right? It's just another rule that Tlingit has. Because if you look at the plus D minus I classifiers that are not zero, you have s, sh, no vowel. If a prefix has a consonant, it must also have a vowel. That's the only reason why you have to have the pronoun in there for the second person. So now you're going to have ide, so this needs to change to da. So if we put ide on there, we've got it. Put your shoes on so we could go. As the parents are pulling their hair out, going crazy because sometimes it's just a kid just will not go. Good question.
Gosh, geez. This is
Sheesh.
good.
Yeah, and these are light bulb moments, and then some of them are going to light on a little bit different than others, right? But like, it's all like once you get to Tlingit, you start getting into, we're leaning into advanced Tlingit with some of these concepts. It's pattern building. So much of it is pattern building, and then the patterns is just all about what are the components that are there, and not like this thing is related to this thing by meaning, but just by pattern alone. Okay. Okay, take 5. And we'll come back and we'll do something with it.
We could do cold class slide.
What's that?
We can do a whole class on one slide.
Right? There's so much here. So coming back to this, who is yelling? Their younger sibling of the same gender is yelling. Right? And so that was what led us down to the river that untangles your mind, right? So there's so much in Tlingit, there's so much. And so we were talking a little bit on the break about some of this stuff. And this, I'll share this with you folks. So there's a couple things I'll put up on our class webpage. So tlingitlanguage.com, Learning Tlingit, Intermediate Tlingit. And there's two things. One is this draft of the Tlingit Verb Components handbook. So this is designed to be a handbook for a board game. And like these are, with these components here, this isn't everything, right? And let me just zoom in a little bit. But if you go through, these are the main, like if you can do these things, you can use the language, right? There's a whole bunch more, but I would say this is your starter kit. This is what you need to sort of get off the ground, right? This will get you, once you get this, we'll push you out of the nest and you'll just start flapping around, right? But so like, what we'll do is we'll go through all of these components and what they really mean and how they work. Some of these you'll recognize, like these are object pronouns. These are preverbs, object pronouns, thematic prefixes, conjugation prefixes, subject pronouns, classifier, stem variation, suffixes, postverb. So when you look at Tlingit, most of everything is right here. It's so much of Tlingit is just building a prefix, build a prefix, build a prefix, build a prefix, right? If you could do that, then people will understand what you're saying. They will, even if there's other parts that are just totally just kind of off. Like if you can get the prefix, people will understand. It's like, okay, you're going to, oh, okay, you're gonna nail it. Okay, I'm gonna nail it into the wall, right? So what this chapter does is it goes through and it talks about every one of these things. Here's what a preverb is. Here's how it works. Here's some examples. Like this verb, if you see the yati, this is yati and tleshbuti, all the way down, all the way down. With this single verb, yati, you can get, that's how it is, that's not how it is, it's there, it affects them, I need it, it is overpowering me, it's calm, it's acceptable, I'm grateful, I'm concerned, that's how I feel, I'm meditating, bear it in mind, appeared before my eyes, visiting them, obedient to me, it's like a boat, right? And like, but as far as just like the meaning, like if you look through this thing, you've got yati, 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 going all the way down. So that single verb doesn't change, but by changing the preverb, you're changing the meaning of what that verb is doing. So that's a lot of what a preverb does, and then it also triggers the type of motion that you have. But I'll put this up there so you folks can go through, you can read it. If this is something you feel like you're ready for, check it out. It's kind of a few steps ahead of where some of us might be. But this is, the goal here is just to sort of give you the answer key to all of these. These are the most commonly used components. Okay, and then it shows you some preverbs that are, this is kind of like, well, it just starts going through and showing you some, right, what they mean and how they work. And then they're kind of by categories too. I haven't looked at this for a little while, but you can have, if you're starting from top to bottom, if you see this thick line, like you can have one of those, and then you can have one of these, then you can have one of these, right? But you can't say ade and adach. You can't. It's sort of like pick one from this group, pick one from that group. And then it also shows you what order they're going to go in, right? So English does this too. This is not, I mean, we've got so much stuff to learn, but you know so many rules in English. Like like I think English has adjectives that need to go in a certain order, right? So it's Clifford the big red dog. It could not be Clifford the red big dog. It just sounds wrong. And you don't know why, but it does. because you can stack adjectives in English, but they have to go in a certain order. There's these categories of them, which I'm sure someone has a list of them, but you just know this stuff. But you don't have to explain it to people. If you're raising a kid, then you probably just sort of say, no, say big red dog, don't say red big dog. But I don't know, it's just really finer point stuff. And then there's adverbs which affect the meaning of it. And that these are really fun to learn how to use, right? ʼatudli is any old way, carelessly. And it goes through. Then it talks about objects, what they are. It lists the objects. It shows you some examples of what happened. And we're doing some of this stuff right now, right? So these ones are changing the subject. Chasachan, tisachan, isachan, yisachan, asachan. And then we go through and we start seeing what happens when you're changing the object. Okay. And those are some things that we're going to do. The other thing is, So let me show you the other thing that I'm going to put up there. And I'm just sort of telling you what they are, because we're going to my goal is to kind of go through all this stuff before it gets to May 1st. May 1st, we're kind of done. So the clock is ticking on our time together just for now. And there certainly will be summer opportunities to do some things. I'll let you folks know as those things start to take shape. So the other thing and y'all are reaching the end of what I can do, because I'm still making I'm trying to figure out what the textbooks are for advanced Tlingit. And it's not just me, this has been 30, 40 years in the making of how do you teach this stuff? And there's a lot of folks like Wooch, James Crippen, and Weha, Jeff Lear, and Ḳaakligéi Yoo X, Carrie Eggleston, and Stu DeKan, Seth Cable, who are linguists who helped to sort of light a path on how to teach some of this stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of elders who I talked to who helped me unlock a lot of this stuff, especially Kayaaní, Nora Marks Dowenhauer, Kayaaní, George Davis, Shikshani, Marge Detson, X'éig, Selena Everson, Saidiya, Mary Anderson. There's a whole bunch of them. I just talked to a lot, Khandak, Ruth Demert. So the other thing that I want to show you folks, and that we'll start going through now, is there's these two handouts that I'll show you. And we'll start with the perfective. So this is part of there's a book that I'll work on. One is just going to talk about all of these components and what they are. And then it's going to go, I'll probably combine these over the summer. So the verb, it'll say, here's the components, here's what they are. It's like a reference sheet, keep going back to it. This part is going to say, this is everything you need to know to build a perfective verb. Once you do this chapter, do the exercises, you're on your way. And then you should be able to get to a point where you look up any verb in Tlingit and you can put it into a perfective. And then you could change the object and subject. And that means you can use that verb in a lot of different ways, especially if you're doing storytelling. Storytelling is a lot of perfective verbs. It happened. They did it, right? I went through and I found a bunch of pictures of people laughing and having fun, because I thought this stuff is going to be hard. So I have to trick everybody. It's not hard. Look at these people are laughing, having fun. Then it goes through, and it sort of says, okay, let's take a look at what a perfective verb would look like. Let me change that in here. Okay. So for example, if we look on the left-hand side, I sewed it, we sewed it, you sewed it, y'all sewed it, they sewed it, they all sewed it. I got to update also my English pronouns for here. It was sewed, or people sewed it. Now if you look at the right, look at the Tlingit. Ka stays the same. The verb stem is the same all the way down. So now we get Ḥwāqa, Watuwaqa, Yiqa, Yiqa, Awaqa, Hasawaqa, Waduwaqa, right? So what has changed is the prefix. Hwa, Watuwa, Yi, Awa, Hasawa, Waduwa. Okay? And so this just says, look at that. That's what these look like. That's what a perfective verb looks like. Then it comes down and it shows you these again. Ḥwaqā, watuaqā, yiqā, yiqā, awaqā, has'awaqā, waduaqā. And then it shows you, looking through, third person plural marker pops up right there for hus. Object 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. But these are the same, these are third person objects all the way down. But when the subject becomes third person, that's what triggers it to switch to right? Those are linked. That's linked to a third person subject. Perfective marker all the way down. It's got to be there. Subject, ḥa, tu, I, y, 0, 0, du. Classifier, same all the way down. Ya, 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 ya. So now we start to think about these things. So then y plus ḥa plus ya is ḥwa every time. Y plus tu plus ya is watua every time. Y plus I plus ya is ye, Y-E-E, for na, ga, and qa. For zero verbs, it will usually be iya. So that's one that has a variation. 0 plus y plus y plus ya is ye, Y-E-E-Y, every time. All the second person plural perfectives will always have Y-E-E-Y every single time. Y, 0, ya, awa. 0, y, du, ya, wadua. The second person plural, watua, is almost identical to the fourth person, wadua. Change the T to a D and you've got it. Any questions? So then it does talk about a few, I gotta update some things as well. Like this, I need to update it. It doesn't show a sound that's no longer in Tlingit. I didn't really understand. It just shows, it's usually it's a Y that can become a W. That's all it means. That's all that means. The perfective marker does not talk about time. What the perfective marker does, it says, let's look at this verb strictly in terms of whether or not it happened. That's all we're concerned about. It did or it didn't. Just tell us that. Did, didn't, did, didn't. Once you throw that perfective marker in there, that's what we're looking at. So then, this shows you some verbs that can be used right now or yesterday, so the time does not affect it. Ausaku, they know it, right? Ixsatin, I see you or I saw you. Ḥewa'ach, they understand you, they understood you. Kautgan, it's bright, it was bright. All of those have a perfective marker, but that doesn't mean it's past tense. So that's what this is talking about. It's like perfective doesn't mean past tense. It's just not Tlingit doesn't change its verbs for time. It changes its verb for event. And the perfective means tell me if it did or didn't happen. That's all it's concerned about. And some things, like to know something, you must have come to know it in order to know it. Okay. So then it talks about the classifier, right? So for a positive perfective verb, these are your only choices for the classifier. Ya, di, si, zi, tle, gle, shi, ji. Must be one of those. If we're doing a straight positive perfective, it has to be plus I. Must be the plus I version. So you do have a couple things here. There's a perfective negative, which we'll learn after this. Kesh awucha. It's different than awacha. Then there's also, I don't even know if in the future, I think I'll just refer to this as a habitual mode. And I'm not even going to worry about the perfective. Well, I don't want you to worry about it right now. But there is one, ʼuchaich, they eat it every time. ʼuchaich, they haven't eaten it yet. Let's see. This chart here is showing you these are the verbs where the classifier goes plus I. And these are the only ones. A positive perfective, an imperfective state verb, a realizational verb, which is very weird. It usually pops up in songs, but it's not really used in day-to-day speech. Potentials are also kind of weird forms, like might do it, might not do it, can't do it, might have done it. Those will all be plus I for some reason. But usually we just say think of the classifier as like it happened. It became that way. That's how I like to think of the classifier, for being plus I. Okay. And then it does talk a little bit about a dependent clause, which I think, again, for now, like when we think about this, you're looking at the negative perfective version, and then you're throwing an I on there. I know I ate it. It's good to see you. I want to kill that black bear. Right? And so if you took the little suffix off of this, you'd say kechsatin, kechwacha, kechwajak. That's the form. You have the negative perfective form when you're tying two verbs together. So now there's a switchboard thing. We sort of introduce this as a concept. And let me show you a bigger version of it. So this is one additional way to think about how all these little components work. And some people hate this metaphor. But if you go from top left to right and then bottom left to right, you're looking at going across the length of the verb. So the idea here is the thing lights up if you turn the prefix on, or the component, right? So we start with a preverb. So in the preverb, you might have zero. Like for example, if we talk about in the process of happening, right? Like yanagut. You could say yanagut. So zero and na verbs get ya. Ga verbs get k. So yanagut, it's getting better. K na kain. Or it's starting to sunshine. Ye undergun. Right, so those have to have K and ye in them. And also the future, we're going to get to that as well. Wooch or wooch, if those pop up right before the verb, they will activate the letter D in the classifier. So you'd say, ich satin, I saw you, chet satin, you saw me, wooch ʼatudli.átk. So it's got to go to z. We saw each other. Ich sechan, I love you. Chet sechan, you love me. Wooch ʼatudli.átk, we love each other. So that's what this is talking about, wooch or wooch. It's a part of the prefix. You can turn it on if you want to. Hus is also in the preverb, sorry. Hus is another preverb that pluralizes the object, third person object or subject. Then we get to the object. You can pick one of these, turn the dial if you want to. Chet, ha, I, ye, zero, or a, ka, or k, ut, ush, a, or sh. We haven't even talked about those ones yet. Then you can have up to 3 thematic prefixes, okay? And we'll talk about what they are. But you've seen some of them. Kudziti, yejene, achchit kate, Kucheta, give me the basketball. This is a pretty rare thing. You can activate this thing in a verb which says you're doing the verb for yourself. So you can say, Khwa'u, I bought it. And you can also say, Gahteu, I bought it for myself. But that's a pretty advanced concept. Now we get into these ones, this one, this one, this one, and this one. These are the conjugation prefixes. You can have 4 spots. For example, you want a future, you need ga, ga. Those 3 make a future. You want a perfective? Turn on the perfective marker right there. You're going to go negative? You better turn on this arealis, right? And so it's just a different metaphor. It's a different visual way to look at these things. And it shows you where they tend to pop up. Ga, 0, qa, na, perfective marker, and then this qa mode. The qa mode is separate from when we talk about it's a 0 verb, it's a na verb, it's a ga verb, it's a qa verb. Those are the conjugation prefixes. Then you also have this thing. So like this qa pops up in every hortative verb. That's why you'd say nakhtu'at because of the qa. We would say atqakhat, let them eat. Here's the subject marker. Kha, tu, ye, 0, do. Here's the classifier. Whoops, here's the classifier group. 0, S, L, S, H. Pick a group. Stays in that group. Once you're in that group, you can turn on the letter D or you can turn on the letter I. That's what this thing is trying to sort of visual. And I was just messing around. I was trying to think of different ways to think of this stuff as I tried to understand it and as I taught it to other folks. And I don't know, you guys are lucky because like 7 years ago when I was teaching this to people, I would just talk and talk and talk. And I would be like, I don't know if I understand it because I'm just talking a lot and not making sense. So, thoughts or questions?
Yeah, this one really does help. I'm trying to understand different modes of the verb. Not too long ago, I was trying to study and figure out, well, how does this word change? How does that word change? And, you know, and I would watch videos of other students. And even in this class, I see students who obviously do their homework. And so I went back and started doing more homework and trying to get involved with the classes so I can kind of keep a different pace than my own pace. But it was like the object, the subject, the possessional, the impossessive, and I think there's one more I couldn't figure out because they all look very similar. You know, first person, second person, all that English language seems all like the same, but they're in different orders. And so now I can find a way. To me, it's like a big math problem. And then there's like things that get together and then they make a different one and they make a different one. But that's just me, and that's the way I relate to it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So one of the things, so then this sort of gets into, and we're running out of time, so we'll pick this up on Thursday. This will tell you all the rules to building a perfective. Like there's a set of rules, but then once you understand these rules, you can look at any verb and predict what the perfective will be for it. Right? And so we'll talk about that. And what it comes down to is what the prefix looks like, what the stem will be. Those are the 2 parts you end up predicting. And you learn how to sort of do those simultaneously. It's pretty fun. But what we'll do is we'll look at all those rules and we'll look at a whole bunch of examples. And then what we'll do as we go through this thing, we're like, look at this verb. Now let me tell you how to read this theme. And then how you can realize that it's happening right here. Khwa'te, watu'ate, yeet. And what this does, it goes 0, D plus 0, S, D plus S, L, D plus L, SH, D plus SH. So it gives you examples going through every single classifier type so that you could see it. But then once you realize, there's some patterns that you will realize as you go through this. And what we'll do is we'll just go through these examples. I'll read them. You can repeat them if you want, and just listen and look at those, because what comes next is some blank ones where you get to guess what it's going to be. And you know what, when we do this, it seems like kind of daunting, and then you're like, what? There's all these different pieces. But once we go through this a few times, you will start to get it. Like you'll be like, okay, no, that makes sense, right? But there's a sneak preview of what's to come. I'll be teaching it from a whole other land.
It looks really helpful.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a big step, but then it's like it unlocks the whole, like, once you can do a perfective, now you can tell a whole bunch of stories and you start ingesting a whole bunch of verbs. And it, you know, and it all comes down to, I think, balancing out like the structural stuff, which is pretty artificial, and then listening and speaking, which is the natural part. You have to naturalize it. You gotta, but that's, you know, hopefully, and but also like you just go through and you listen to that talk story again. You'll be like, oh, I can hear all these perfectives. I just hear them now, right? And you just keep listening to that same story, and you'll keep getting different things out of it. I was getting jittery there. Maybe I'm freezing. Must be time to go. Ḥaakligéi.
Goodness, teesh.
ʼatángi.
Goodness, geez, yay, Konstantin Satsu.
Ďakujem.
I'm gonna go eat my herring eggs with Kikamon.
Dip, dip, dip. Dip it with attitude. Ḥaakligéi.